Hey everyone, online campus pastor Robert Murphy, and I'm here with Marty Barnhart, Director of Ministry Expansion, and we're in the midst of our God I Have a Question series, and throughout this series, lead pastor Mark or one of our other pastors are answering one of the questions that you have submitted. Now we're not able to answer all the questions on a Sunday morning, so we thought we'd take this time to answer a number of the questions that did come in, a way to address them, maybe not as in-depth on a Sunday morning, but just to be able to give some leads as to on some answers with these questions. And today, I thought I'd ask Marty on the easy question of war, and really kind of what does the Bible say about war? How do we balance that out with teachings from Jesus, Sermon on the Mount? Mm-hmm. Some people wrote in about, hey, what God says, "Thou shalt not kill," mm-hmm. the Ten Commandments, and people also ask, well, what about those who invoke God when going to war? Mm. And I mean that's a broad base to kind of go with. But I thought I'd just ask you, when you hear those kind of questions, what do you go to? What's kind of your basis to, when you go to the Bible as far as trying to answer some of those questions?
It's a great question, Robert, and it's one that is really difficult to answer because quite often people look at Jesus' teachings and they say he seemed to be all about peace, he seemed to be all about love.
Right.
And so how do we correlate that with this whole notion of going to war and defending ourselves? Second, they struggle with the whole element of the Old Testament Israel.
Yeah.
The people came out of Egypt. We know they came out 430 years after they were literally taken there by their own father Jacob. Jacob takes down this small nation of 70. They turn into this huge, colossal people of 2 million plus. And now they're being led into a new land. And God says through Moses and Joshua, when you go in, be aware you're going to be going into a foreign, hostile nation. And he says this to them in Deuteronomy chapter 20. He says, however, in the cities of the nation the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes. And we say, wow, I mean, that's stern.
Yeah.
But then he goes on, he says this, here's the reason why. He says, completely destroy these nations, and he names the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, all these ites. Otherwise, here's the reason, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord.
Right. So
God's whole basis for the nation of Israel was to go in and inhabit a new land, but not take on the customs of the people that lived there. God believed, and he prophesied this back to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, that those people would be so entrenched in their sin that they would lead the nation of Israel away. The commandments that were given, and you reference this in your way of kaizing this question, and the questions have been asked, we're told in the sixth commandment, do not kill. God's prohibition there is for you and me.
Right. We
live in God's economy as a civilized people. And he says back in Genesis chapter 9, much like he says in Exodus chapter 20, don't kill, therefore we keep the peace. We keep a civil consciousness. We protect the blood, the rights of life to a person. So the do not kill is for you and me. The defend yourself, the go to war here is for these people of Israel to conquer a land. Now all this changes when we get to the New Testament.
Yeah.
And I can be very frank with you, it becomes very dicey. How do we select this? How do we make this happen?
Right.
Quite often, when you and I go to war as a people, living here in the United States, for instance, you and I have never known war. I was never drafted. You've never been drafted. We've never been under the threat of a draft. And in turn, if you and I ever went to serve in the armed forces, which we would gladly do, we would go because of our own thinking, our own volition, our own will.
Right.
And in doing so, why would we do that? First of all, we would go to war for the United States of America because of policy, or because of protecting a people. Quite often, war in this country is driven by policy. We go in and protect a nation because we believe our foreign policy is at stake, or there's the interest of that going on.
Right.
Second, we go in to defend a people. We go in and we say, because of a dictator, because of a regime, because of something going on in a country, we as a nation believe we should go in and bring defense to that nation. Now, why do we do that? What's the context of Scripture? I believe the context of this is found in Romans chapter 13. Paul says it this way very simply. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Mm-hmm. if God establishes the authorities, then those authorities may call for you and me to go in and bring defense to our nation. Now, you and I would say, well, it seems easier if we're being those who defend our own city, our own neighborhood, our own home. True. But what if you were called upon to defend the foreign policy of the United States or to defend the people? We have many of our military who may watch this, and they may say, that's why I went. I went to defend my nation. I went to because I believe in the freedom of our people that does extend to the people around the world, to bring them at least a measure of freedom. Yeah. So why do I obey this? Because I say the authorities that are there are those that are appointed by God.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Just to, not to counter that, but just to add a different take on it.
Please.
I just recently met with a friend of mine who was a specialist did 2 tours in Iraq, and he came back, and I know he's battled cynicism at times toward, just toward, not I wouldn't say life, but I think just toward why we went to war and what was it all about.
Right.
And I think for someone like that, because I know, and I'm grateful for our military. It's like you said, it's something they go and put themselves at risk, for us and for others.
Right.
What would you say to, I guess, someone like that who's done a tour or two overseas? They've seen conflict. They've maybe had to take in someone's life, and they carry that weight now. And they wrestle with, okay, our country sometimes invokes God with these, we try not to overtly do it with the war on terror because of this, also want to be sensitivity with the Muslim people. But what do we say to them, for those that just kind of wrestle with, I'm not sure what I did was, they just have a hard time grasping, did what I do, was that a good thing? Was that a right thing? God, how are you involved in all of this? Why is this continuing to go on?
I think we'd go back to 2 principles. The first comes from the Puritans. And the Puritans would teach us and say everything comes under the providence of God. Okay. That is, everything is in the plan of what God would bring forth for a people and for a nation. Yeah. And so if our nation calls us to go to the defense of some other, and in the course of that military conflict, a soldier takes the life of another, I believe he should put himself under the authority or the plan of God to say, God knew this was going to happen. I know there's going to be things he or she is going to deal with thereafter. He's going to come home with scars far deeper than we can ever see. Right. And they have to deal with that. Hopefully a community like this at Christ Community will help them deal with that and help them work through the pain, the difficulty of that. Yeah. Second, not only is there the providence of God, but there's also the measure of saying, I am seeking to do what God would call me to do. Yeah. Service. Yeah. And this whole service mindset says, I'm serving God as I serve our nation. So there's both aspects, both a higher law that I'm going under God's direction, God's providence, if you will, then there's the service aspect. I'm serving so that I might serve our nation, therefore our nation being under God.
No, that's good. That's good. And it's a tough thing. I mean, I remember talking to my friend. I didn't know sometimes necessarily what to say because I know each individual is going to be different. I was just, they're like you said, there's scars that they come back with, and it's hard necessarily to address them all. But like you said, if we can best be a community where we can love them and support them and serve them, that's the best thing. And like you said, like trusting in the providence of God and just trusting in, hey, you know what, God can redeem that and work that for good. That's right. And but hey, Marty, I'm sure, like I said, this is something we can talk a lot on. Right. And for those watching, especially our Bellevue campus, there's a lot of service personnel down there, and we do a lot of ministry there. But if you're watching, you have more questions, I'd say check out Bellevue campus, but also just call into the church, and there will be someone that would love to meet with you. I know our Tuesday night ministry, they do our renewal groups. They're working on a lot of veterans that come with PTSD. That's right. And I think that's right, PTSD. Yeah,
that's right. Post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, and so we'd love to be able to, if you're watching and something you kind of wrestle with, we'd love to be able to minister and serve you. But hey, Marty, thanks for taking time and just to help us, just talk a little bit about this difficult topic of kind of Christianity and war. So thank you very much.
I do it, Robert. Thanks to all those who serve, and thanks for them giving their lives and giving themselves.
Yeah, everyone, thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.